Okay, last time, about a week ago, I put down modulation from the 7-flat-9 chord, which is page 70. If you have the book, Let's Enjoy Piano, Self-Expressive Skills, you can follow along. If not, go to the website, pick up a copy, let'senjoypiano.com. So we went over a complicated situation on modulation through the 7-flat-9 chord, which is based on a fully diminished chord. That's page 70. And if you look on page 70, you have all the shapes of the diminished chords. We're going to back up a little, and we're going to go through tritone substitution and other ways to modulate. Page 70, you see I've laid out all of the diminished chords in similar shapes. So here's all the similar shapes of the diminished chords, and they are the plurality, which is the top three notes of a seventh chord. In other words, a chord within a chord, a triad within a seventh chord. So we have C7, the top three notes being E diminished. That could stand on its own, but it's also the top of a 7 chord, which is the key chord that establishes the key in any key. The 7 chord, the 7th chord, not the major 7, but the dominant 7. Because it has the diminished chord, which has the tritone. A diminished chord is a minor chord, flat 5. Once you see a flat 5, it's telling you it's a diminished chord. So there's the diminished chord, flat 5, which is a tritone. 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. So between E and B flat, it's called a tritone, 3 steps. And that tritone is used in tritone substitution because 2 7th chords share the same tritone. And so if you look on page 20, there's the cycle and every key written down, which we'll go through. Not every key, but we're going to go through the principle behind it. So the tritone substitution, you can substitute any 7th chord across the cycle because they share the same tritone. So let's take G7. G7 has a B diminished. And this would be B minor. That would be B minor. That's the major 7 note. And if you flat the 5 of a minor chord, you get a diminished chord. There's this G7. And here's the tritone, F and B. 3 steps apart. 1, 2, 3. So that's the tritone of G7. And across the cycle, you see the dotted line across the cycle is D flat 7. D flat, which is a tritone away from G. Here's G, here's D flat. That's 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. So D flat 7, there's the tritone of F and B. Within the diminished chord, here's F diminished, here's F major, F minor, F diminished. D flat in the bass. So the tritone as our substitute chords. If a chord has 2 notes in common, you could substitute it. So therefore, you can modulate when you're in the key of C and you had a G7 chord. You can substitute that G7 for a D flat 7. And D flat 7, if you look on page 20, the 5-7 chord, G flat 7, or F sharp 7, or I mean D flat 7, is the 5th of the key of G flat, the 5. So already you're in the key of G flat, going from there to, so you're in the key of C with G7. Substitute for D flat 7 and resolve to G flat. So you modulate from C to G flat. Now it depends on the song you're doing and the what you want to get, where you want to go. So these are just general suggestions. It may not work to go from C to G flat. If you have to go from C to G flat, that's what you do. If you want to go to any other key, you can look at the principles of modulation I have summarized on page 29C. Switching from one key to another is modulation. And we have common tone modulation. In this sense, it says the C minor is in the key of E flat, and it's also in the key of A flat. So if you're on a C minor chord, or C minor 7, if you look on the left side of page 20, you see C minor in the key of E flat. It's the 6th chord. Now it moves from C minor to F minor. That's the 2 of E flat, 6, 2. But it also appears as the 2 chord in B flat. So there's the C minor is a 2 chord in B flat, or C minor 7 is the 2 chord in B flat. So if you move from C minor to F minor, you're in the key of E flat. If you move from C minor and you want to go to the key of B flat, you go from C minor, instead of F minor, you go to F. Now you're in the key of B flat, or F7. So right here, you can see C minor. C minor's in the key of E flat. If you want to go to F minor, you know you're in the key of E flat. If you're going and you want to modulate to B flat, you go to F7, which puts you in the key of B flat. The same bass line. You're still going from C to F. So you go from C minor to F minor. That appears in the key of E flat, but C minor to F major, or F7, now you're in the key of B flat. So we use the common tone of C minor to sidestep, or I should say pivot into the other key. And that's common tone, common chord modulation. Common tone modulation, number 2, is if you have, let's say, the key of, you're in F minor chord. That's an A flat note. But it's also appears in the key of E. This is the E, G sharp, B. And when you play F minor, because the F family is F, A flat, C, you can't say F, G sharp, because the F family is A, some kind of F, A, C. So therefore A flat, that's why the black key has 2 notes, A flat for F. If you go to E, you're pivoting on that common note. It's still A flat, but now it becomes G sharp, because E is spelled E, G sharp, B. So that's pivoting on one note. It's called common note pivot modulation. Sidestep is a half step up or down. If you end a song and you're right on G7, you can pivot right into G flat 7, and now you're in the key of B, F sharp 7, G flat 7. So you're going, G7, G7, G flat 7, and now you're in 5-1 relationship. So to practice your 5-1 relationships, page 3 at the bottom goes through what the root and the fifth, root fifth of all the chords are. That's your 5-1 relationship, and that's what the cycle of fifths is based on, the movement of the pinky going down. Let me just go back to that G7 idea. You can substitute, if you're ending a song traditionally, you end G7 to C. Now you can use tritone substitution. Instead of G7, you can play D flat 7. And that's what tritone substitution does, changes the traditional 5-1 to the chromatic movement of D flat 7 to C major 7, what I call the za-za jazz ending. So when you're ending, that's your jazz ending, rather than, because they share the same tritone, and they resolve. The D flat 7 has a tritone F to B, it resolves outward to C. Where the G7 has the tritone B to F, it resolves inward to C. So that's traditional harmony on the movement of a seventh chord. We have a little competition with a lawnmower outside now, but anyway, we'll continue. And the fourth one is after any 5/7 to 1, you can go anywhere. So in other words, once you're in the key of C, or C, you're in the key of C, and you go to G. There's your 5. There's your 7. Now you can also pivot G7. You can pivot to G minor 7. You can sidestep and pivot on one note. And that's G minor. Now you're in the key of F2, 5, 1. So you're in the key of C, and you're at G7. Now you pivot, G minor, and now you're in C7 and F. So that's another way to pivot modulation. G7 becomes G minor 7. So you don't have to pivot to the first note in the key. You can pivot to the 2 chord of the key. That's the 2 chord of F, the G minor. So F, or G7, G minor 7. Now you're in the key of F. Or if you're ending a song on the key of C, you end with C major 7. After the G7, you end with C major 7. Now you change C7 to C major 7 to C7. Now you're in the key of F. And that's that 5-1 relationship number 4, the interrelationship between the one relationship can move anywhere. Once you're at the 1 chord, after you establish a 5-1, let's say in the key of C, you're going G7 to C. Now you can make C into C7. Right there, you now can go to the key of F. Now right there, C7, I went to F. That's a 5-1 relationship. Now I can change F to F7. Now I'm in the key of B flat. And all that's listed on page 20, that the 5-1 relationship establishes the key on the last column on the right of page 20. So everything that you really need to know, I designed this page because it's everything, every key at a glance. You can see the cycle right there, the substitution, the baseline movements on page 21, how the baseline moves. Mostly a fifth is the first choice the composer uses, a half step is next, etc. And then page, what do we say, 70 for the diminished chords, because you need that, know your diminished chords to know your dominant 7 chords. And then we had the page 29C for the modulation, the 4 ways to modulate, and a couple of them are intertwined: common note and common chord, whatever you want to call them. There's 4 or 5 different ways that you modulate there. So that's getting from one key to another. So have fun. Try to, if you're putting a medley together and you're all in the one key, then there's no problem. But you want to go to another key, you either end on the 1 chord, change it to the dominant chord of the measure of the key you want to go to, and then you're off. Or pivot on in somewhere in the key, the song that you're doing. There might be a G7 before you go to the C. So on the G7 you can pivot to G minor 7, and then you're in the key of F. So there's whatever works, use it. And those 4 ways of modulation with page 20, 29C, and know your diminished chords, because the diminished chords, the flat 5 is your tritone. That's also called augmented fourth as well. But because we're flatting the 5 of a minor, we call it the flat 5. Okay, threw a lot at you, but that's the preliminary way to modulate. A little more advanced is the 7 flat 9. It's got 4 possibilities, which I went through in that last video. Okay, so I hope that helps understand the whole great wonder of modulation, getting from one place to another in a way that you like. It works best for you. You choose the best way to do it. Okay, if you have any questions, you can write to me at email@letsenjoypiano.com. If you want to take some online lessons, that's on the website too. Check it out, and hopefully this helped you out, and I'll see you next time around. Hopefully I won't see the lawnmower next time around.